The jewelry store glittered like a palace of glass and light. Golden chandeliers hung from the ceiling, scattering warm sparkles across polished counters lined with diamonds, rubies, and sapphires. Everything inside shone like a dream too far away for ordinary people. The air smelled faintly of expensive perfumes drifting from the customers browsing inside. Their clothes were sharp, neat, and filled with the kind of confidence that comes with wealth. Through the large glass doors, a boy stepped in quietly. His shirt was plain, slightly faded, the fabric worn at the elbows. His shoes were dusty from the street outside, and his hair needed a comb. He didn't look like someone who belonged among glittering stones and shimmering metals. Yet his eyes carried brightness, wide and curious, as if he had stepped into another world. For a moment, no one paid attention. The boy's footsteps were light, almost hesitant, as he took in the shining counters and the dazzling pieces inside. He stood still, letting his eyes travel from the bracelets wrapped around velvet cushions to the rings resting in tiny slots. But soon, the customers noticed him. One by one, eyes followed his small frame as he walked slowly toward the center of the store. Whispers started to flow like little waves. "What's he doing here?" a woman muttered to her companion. Her lips curled in amusement. "Look at his clothes," another voice said softly, though not softly enough to hide the mockery. A laugh broke out near the far end of the counter. The boy heard it all. His ears burned, but his steps didn't stop. He moved closer to the main counter where the most expensive items sparkled under bright white lights. A necklace sat in the middle, its diamonds catching every flicker of brightness, sending little beams dancing across the glass. The boy stopped in front of it, his breath caught in his chest. His fingers twitched slightly, as if he wanted to touch the glass, but held himself back. An attendant behind the counter noticed him and frowned. His brows pulled together, as if the boy's very presence disturbed the shine of his display. He leaned forward and asked sharply, "Can I help you?" His tone wasn't welcoming. It was sharp, doubting, almost insulting. The boy's throat felt dry, but he swallowed and pointed toward the necklace. His voice was calm, though quiet. "Can I see that one?" The attendant blinked in surprise. Then he let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "Do you even know how much this costs?" he asked, his voice loud enough for the nearest customers to hear. A few of them chuckled again. One woman whispered loudly to another, "He probably can't even afford the ribbon they use to wrap it." Another voice added, "Children from the street should know where to stand." Laughter rippled like cruel music in the air. The boy's hands trembled slightly at his sides. His chest rose and fell a little faster, but his eyes didn't waver. He kept them fixed on the necklace, shining under the bright light. He repeated, softly but firmly, "Please, can I see it?" The attendant sighed heavily, rolling his eyes as if granting a favor. With a mocking smirk, he took out the necklace. He handled it carelessly, dangling it as though the boy would drop it in the dirt at any moment. The laughter in the background grew stronger. Some customers leaned closer just to enjoy the scene unfolding before them. The boy reached out carefully, his small fingers stretching toward the diamonds. He held the necklace with both hands as though it was something alive and fragile. For a long moment, he stared at it, his reflection shimmering back at him from the shining stones. He imagined how it would look resting against his mother's neck. He saw her tired face, the way her hands worked hard every day, and the smile she carried despite struggles. His throat tightened, but his grip on the necklace stayed steady. The laughter around him cut into the silence. Someone whispered, "This is ridiculous." Another said, "Maybe he just wants to touch it before he runs." The word stabbed, but the boy stayed silent. His lips pressed into a thin line, his eyes still fixed on the piece of jewelry that seemed to hold a world of meaning for him. A hush spread for a moment, broken only by the sound of the boy's quiet breath. Then he looked up, meeting the eyes of the attendant. His voice was soft but carried a firmness no one expected. "I'll take it," he said. The air froze. The sentence hit like a stone dropped in water, rippling shock across the room. For a second, no one moved. Then the silence shattered into louder laughter than before. A man near the counter burst into chuckles. A woman covered her mouth, shaking her head. The attendant smirked openly now, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You'll take it? Do you even know what you're saying, boy?" The boy didn't answer. He simply lowered his eyes back to the necklace, holding it gently but firmly, as if his quiet heart carried a truth no one else could see. Around him, the store buzzed with cruel amusement, but in that stillness, he stood like a rock in the middle of a mocking sea, small, humble, yet unshaken. The jewelry store sparkled like a small palace. Lights from the golden chandeliers poured across shining counters, filled with rings, bracelets, and necklaces. The glass was polished so perfectly that every gem looked like it was floating in air. Diamonds scattered light in every direction, and customers walked slowly as if each piece deserved a long stare. The air itself felt heavy with perfume and money. Through the large glass doors, a boy walked in. His shirt was plain and worn, the kind that had seen too many washes. His shoes were old, carrying the dust of the street. His hair was a little messy, as though no comb had touched it that morning. He didn't look like someone who belonged in this place. Still, his eyes were wide with wonder. He took a few quiet steps, his gaze jumping from one glittering counter to the next. At first, no one noticed him, but slowly, the room began to turn toward him. A lady in a silk scarf raised an eyebrow. A man in a sharp suit smirked. Their eyes lingered on his clothes, then on his shoes. Whispers started, low and sharp. "What's he doing here?" one voice muttered. Another said with a laugh, "Maybe he got lost." The boy kept moving forward. His steps were small, but steady. He passed by bracelets curled on velvet cushions, rings that sparkled like tiny stars, and finally stopped at the center display. There, under a bright white spotlight, lay a necklace more beautiful than anything he had ever seen. The diamonds glowed like frozen drops of light, and the gold chain gleamed as though it held fire inside. He leaned closer, his reflection shining back at him from the glass. His chest tightened, and for a moment, the whole store seemed to disappear. Then a voice cut through the air. "Can I help you?" The store attendant had noticed him. The man's brows were pulled tight, his tone sharp. It didn't sound like an offer of help. It sounded like a warning. The boy swallowed. His throat felt dry. Still, he raised his hand and pointed toward the necklace. "Can I see that one?" His voice was quiet but polite. The attendant blinked. Then he let out a short laugh. He tilted his head, speaking louder now, loud enough for the customers nearby. "Do you even know how much that costs?" His smirk widened. That was all it took. A ripple of laughter spread through the room. A woman whispered to her friend, "He probably can't even afford the box." Another said, "Children from the street should look through the window, not inside." Their voices mixed with laughter, soft at first, then louder. The boy's ears burned, but his eyes stayed on the necklace. His fingers curled at his sides. His lips trembled for a second, then pressed firmly together. After a pause, he repeated in the same calm voice, "Please, can I see it?" The attendant sighed loudly, as if it were a burden. Rolling his eyes, he unlocked the case. He lifted the necklace carelessly, letting it dangle. "Here," he said with mock patience, "just don't drop it." His tone carried more insult than trust. The boy reached out carefully. His hands shook a little, but when he touched the necklace, he held it with both palms, steady and gentle. For a long moment, he stared at it. The diamonds caught the light, shining against his plain shirt. He pictured something no one else in the room could see, how it would look on his mother's neck. He remembered her tired smile, her hands rough from work, her soft voice that carried him through hard days. His throat tightened again, but he didn't let go. Around him, the crowd muttered. "Ridiculous," someone said. "He's wasting time," another added. The words were sharp, like small knives, but the boy didn't answer. He stayed still, his eyes fixed on the necklace, as though it carried a world of meaning. Finally, he looked up. The attendant was watching with impatience. The boy's voice came out soft but steady. "I'll take it," he said. For a moment, the store froze. The words echoed in the silence, almost too big for his small voice. Then came the explosion of laughter. A man in a suit bent forward, clutching his stomach. A woman shook her head in disbelief. The attendant smirked openly now, shaking his head. "You'll take it," he mocked. "Do you even understand what you're saying?" But the boy didn't flinch. He lowered his eyes again to the necklace in his hands. He held it as if it already belonged to him. Around him, the laughter grew louder, bouncing off the walls of glass and gold. Yet in the middle of that noise he stood still, quiet, and unshaken, like a stone planted deep in the earth. The boy's words lingered in the air like a challenge no one had expected. "I'll take it." The sentence was small, but the ripples it sent through the store were enormous. The sound of laughter grew louder, bouncing off the walls. The customers shook their heads, as if the boy had told the funniest joke of the year. A man near the counter leaned over to whisper, but his voice carried far enough for everyone to hear. "He's out of his mind. That piece costs more than everything he owns." His companion giggled and nodded in agreement. The attendant smirked openly now. "You'll take it," he repeated, dragging out the words. He crossed his arms and leaned forward. "And how exactly will you pay, boy? With coins from your pocket? Or maybe you'll trade your old shoes for it?" The sarcasm was sharp, and the crowd loved it. Laughter broke out again, harder this time. The boy stood still, his lips pressed together, but his hands did not shake anymore. He looked down at the necklace resting gently in his palms. The diamonds sparkled against the dull fabric of his shirt, and for a moment he forgot the laughter, the whispers, the stares. In his mind, he saw his mother. He saw her standing at the small table at home, fixing his shirt before he left, her fingers moving carefully, though the fabric was too thin to hide the holes. He remembered how her smile never left her face, even when her hands were tired from work. He whispered softly, almost to himself, "It's perfect." Someone nearby caught the words and scoffed. "Perfect? For him? What nonsense." Another voice chimed in, "He's wasting everyone's time. Throw him out already." The noise swirled around him, but the boy's eyes stayed fixed on the necklace. The attendant finally stretched out his hand. "Enough," he said coldly. "Give it back before you break it." But the boy didn't move right away. His fingers brushed along the edge of the chain, and for a second, the whole store seemed to pause. The lights sparkled brighter, the murmurs faded in his ears, and only the necklace mattered. It wasn't just jewelry. It was a dream, a symbol, a promise he wanted to keep. Still, he knew he couldn't stand there forever. Slowly, carefully, he placed the necklace back on the glass counter. His hands lingered for a heartbeat longer, then pulled away. His chest rose and fell heavily, but his face stayed calm. The attendant snatched the necklace quickly, as though afraid the boy would change his mind. He stuffed it back into the case and locked it with a snap. "There," he said with a mocking smile. "You've had your look. Now go before you embarrass yourself further." But the boy didn't leave. He lifted his head, his eyes sharper now. "I told you," he said softly, but the words carried more strength than before. "I'll take it." The laughter roared again. A woman in pearls pressed a hand to her chest, laughing so hard her shoulders shook. "Does he even understand what buying means?" she said. Another man chuckled. "Maybe he thinks the shop is a charity." The attendant lost his patience. He waved his hand toward the door. "Out. This is no place for you. Customers like you don't belong here." The boy didn't move. He stood rooted to the floor, his chin lifting slightly, his eyes shining with a quiet fire. He wasn't shouting, he wasn't fighting, but something in his stillness carried weight. A silence followed, a strange pause that even the laughter couldn't completely cover. The boy turned his gaze toward the chandelier above. Its crystals shimmered, scattering light across his face. He let the silence stretch, almost as if he wanted everyone to feel it. Then, with a calm voice, he asked, "Why do you laugh at someone you don't know?" The question caught a few by surprise. The laughter stuttered, turning into awkward coughs. The boy wasn't angry. His voice wasn't loud. It was simple, steady, and honest. The attendant sneered, brushing it off. "Because this isn't a playground. People like you don't just walk in here and demand what they can't afford. That's why." The boy looked at him, then at the crowd. For a moment, his silence was louder than the mockery had ever been. He turned his head slowly, his eyes meeting those who had laughed. His gaze wasn't harsh, it was calm, almost questioning. It made some of them shift uncomfortably, looking away as though they'd been caught. He let out a quiet breath and whispered, "You'll see." No one understood what he meant, and so the laughter started again, though softer this time, tinged with unease. The boy lowered his eyes, but the faint trace of a smile touched his lips. He didn't explain himself. He didn't need to. As the noise returned around him, he stood quietly, his small figure almost lost among the glitter of the store. But his calmness, his patience, carried a weight that none of the mocking voices could erase. Something unspoken hung in the air, a feeling that this moment wasn't finished, that the story wasn't as simple as they thought. The boy's last words, "You'll see," floated in the air, quiet yet heavy. The customers didn't understand what he meant, but they laughed anyway, trying to bury their own unease in sound. The attendant folded his arms, smirking with pride, as though he had won some kind of battle. "Out," he said again firmly, his voice sharp. "This place is for real buyers, not dreamers." The boy stood still. He didn't flinch, he didn't argue. His eyes simply lowered to the floor for a moment, then lifted again with the same quiet steadiness. He looked small among the chandeliers, the glass counters, the shining stones, and the rich faces surrounding him. But in that stillness, there was a strength that unsettled some of the onlookers. Just then, the glass door opened with a sharp chime. The laughter stopped as heads turned. A man stepped in. His presence immediately filled the room. He was tall, dressed in a tailored suit that spoke of quiet wealth and authority. His shoes clicked against the marble floor, and with every step, the air seemed to grow heavier. The attendant's smirk faltered. He straightened quickly, recognizing the figure. The crowd murmured softly, their laughter fading into whispers. Someone gasped, "That's him." Another whispered, "The owner." The man's eyes scanned the room, sharp and commanding, until they landed on the boy standing at the counter. For a moment his expression softened, but when he noticed the necklace locked away again, and the mocking faces still lingering with guilt, his jaw tightened. "What is happening here?" His voice was deep, steady, and carried across the store with ease. No one dared to laugh now. The attendant cleared his throat nervously, his earlier arrogance slipping away. "Sir, nothing, sir. Just a boy who wandered in. He was wasting everyone's time. I was about to show him the door." The man's eyes darkened. He stepped closer, his polished shoes clicking sharply against the floor. "Show him the door," he repeated slowly. Then, in a tone that made the room go silent, he asked, "Do you know who you are speaking to?" The attendant froze. His mouth opened, then shut. Confusion flickered across his face. He looked at the boy, then back at the man. "Sir, I don't understand." The man moved to the boy's side, placing a firm but gentle hand on his shoulder. His voice dropped, softer now, but still filled with authority. "This boy," he said, "is my son." Gasps filled the air. The words struck like thunder. The mocking smiles vanished instantly. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, their faces flushing with shame. The woman who had laughed the loudest earlier pressed her lips tightly together, her eyes dropping to the floor. The man in the suit who had joked about coins stepped back quietly, wishing he could disappear. The attendant's face turned pale. His smirk was gone, replaced by panic. He stammered, "Sir, I didn't know. I meant no disrespect. I just—" But the man cut him off sharply. "Respect should not depend on what you know. Respect is free. And yet you couldn't offer even that." His voice was calm, but the weight in it pressed on every person in the room. He turned to the crowd, his eyes sweeping across their guilty faces. "All of you laughed," he said, "at a child, at someone who walked in with nothing but curiosity. You judged him by his clothes, his shoes, the dust on him. Not once did you stop to think he could be someone's son, someone's heart, someone's reason to live. You didn't care. You only cared that he didn't look like you." The silence was crushing now. No one moved, no one spoke. The chandeliers still sparkled above, but the beauty of the store felt dull in the weight of his words. The boy stood quietly, his eyes lowered, his face flushed with mixed feelings, embarrassment, relief, and something deeper, pride. He hadn't needed to speak for himself. His father's presence had done it for him. The man turned back to the boy, his face softening again. "If he wants the necklace," he said firmly, loud enough for everyone to hear, "he doesn't need to pay. This store is his home too. Everything here is his as much as it is mine." The crowd lowered their heads. No one dared to meet the boy's eyes now. Their earlier laughter seemed cruel and childish in the silence that followed. The boy blinked, his hands tightening slightly at his sides. He whispered, "Father," but the man gave his shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "You don't need to explain yourself to anyone," he said gently. "Let them explain to themselves why they laughed." The air in the store was thick with shame. Customers shuffled their feet, suddenly eager to leave. The attendant's hands shook as he bowed slightly, murmuring apologies that no one listened to. The boy finally looked up, his eyes glistening. He saw the necklace inside the glass once more, shining just as brightly as before. But now, it wasn't just about the necklace. It was about something far greater, about dignity, about truth, about the lesson that had unfolded before everyone's eyes. The man guided his son away from the counter, his presence still towering over the silence. The boy walked beside him, his small steps steady. Behind them, the glitter of the jewelry no longer seemed as important as the weight of what had just been revealed. The store stood frozen after the father's words. The laughter that had once echoed so confidently now seemed like a distant mistake. The chandeliers still sparkled, the gems still glowed under the lights, but none of it carried the same shine. What remained was silence, heavy and uncomfortable, pressing down on every person who had mocked just moments ago. The boy walked slowly beside his father. His eyes stayed low, though his chest felt lighter than before. The cruel voices that had stabbed at him earlier were gone now, replaced by a quiet that almost begged for forgiveness. He could feel their stares on his back, not with arrogance this time, but with regret. The father stopped at the center of the store and turned to face the crowd. His hand still rested on the boy's shoulder, steady and protective. His voice was calm, but every word struck like truth carved in stone. "All of you came here today to admire beauty," he began. "You came to see shining gems, gold and diamonds. But in your search for beauty, you forgot something far more valuable: kindness." No one dared to move. The customers who had laughed the loudest stood with lowered eyes, their faces burning. The attendant, once so full of pride, now trembled behind the counter. "You looked at this boy," the father continued, "and you saw only his clothes. You saw only the dust on his shoes. You measured him with your eyes and decided he was unworthy of standing here. But what you did not see," he paused, tightening his hand gently on his son's shoulder, "was his heart, his respect, his quiet strength." The boy lifted his gaze slowly, his eyes shimmering under the lights. For the first time, the crowd truly saw him. Not the faded shirt, not the worn shoes, but the calm dignity he had carried through their laughter. The father's voice deepened. "Wealth means nothing if it blinds you to humanity. A diamond may sparkle, but it is worthless compared to a kind heart. Gold may shine, but it cannot cover cruelty. Today, you laughed at someone who did nothing but ask politely. Think about what that says, not about him, but about you." The words hung in the air like a mirror, forcing everyone to see themselves. A few shuffled uncomfortably, their faces red with shame. Some looked down at the marble floor, as though it might swallow them whole. The boy whispered softly, "Father, it's okay." But the man shook his head. "No, son, it is not okay. They need to hear this. Because tomorrow it might be someone else who walks in here. Someone they don't recognize. Someone they think is small. And if they forget this moment, they will make the same mistake again." The boy fell silent, his heart swelling with a mixture of pride and humility. He didn't need the crowd's approval anymore. He had something stronger, his father's hand on his shoulder, and the quiet truth that kindness was worth more than all the gold in the room. The man turned back to the counter. He gestured toward the necklace locked behind the glass. "Bring it out," he ordered. The attendant rushed to obey, his hands shaking as he unlocked the case and lifted the necklace with far more care than before. He placed it on the counter, his eyes lowered, unable to meet the boy's gaze. The father nodded to his son. "Take it," he said softly. The boy picked up the necklace once more. This time, he did not feel the sting of laughter around him. This time, no one dared to mock. The diamond sparkled against his hands, but the shine felt different now, warmer, stronger, filled with meaning. He clutched it gently, not as a prize, but as a gift of love he had always dreamed of giving. Together, father and son walked toward the door. The boy held the necklace close to his chest. Behind them, the crowd remained silent, weighed down by the lesson they had just witnessed. The chandeliers still glowed above, but the brightest light in the store was not the diamonds, not the gold. It was the truth that lingered in the air. Respect costs nothing, yet its absence can cost everything. Just before stepping outside, the father turned once more to the people inside. His final words were steady, simple, and unforgettable. Remember this: never laugh at someone because of what they wear or where they come from. You may not know their story. And if you cannot offer kindness, at least do not offer cruelty. With that, he stepped out into the daylight, his son walking proudly beside him. The glass door closed with a soft chime, leaving the store in silence. Inside, the people who had laughed moments earlier stood quietly, each lost in their own thoughts. The memory of the boy's calm face and the father's powerful words would not leave them soon. It lingered, heavier than gold, sharper than diamonds. And for the boy, as he walked down the street with his father, the necklace held more than beauty. It carried love, strength, and a memory that no laughter could ever erase.